The forest had gone quiet. Snow hadn't fallen yet, but the cold had. It bit at the bear's paws with every slow step. Hunger made him clumsy. Thin. His ribs pressed against his fur like broken tree limbs. He hadn't eaten in days, not truly, and every scent of life vanished in the frost. Then, a smell. Faint. Old. But there. He stopped. Sniffed the wind. Dog. Not wolf, dog. That strange scent of fur and firewood. Of something not entirely wild, but not home either. The bear turned toward it instinctively, nostrils flaring. Tracks. Pressed into the damp forest floor, half frozen, heading downslope. Small paws, spaced unevenly. Limping? He followed. His breathing grew heavier. The wind shifted. The scent was fading. But he knew that smell. Somewhere in a place he couldn't name, he had known it. A creek crossed the trail. The bear stepped through the icy water without flinching. On the other side, the prints grew shallower. Slower. More dragged. Then they stopped. He stared at the ground, sniffed, circled once. The trail ended under a fir tree, where the earth had been disturbed. Leaves scraped back. Pine needles shifted. Soil darker than it should have been. He pawed at the edge. A flash of fur. Still. Curled. Lifeless. The bear pulled back, ears twitching. Dead. The dog was dead. But that wasn't what made him freeze. It was what lay beside it. Wrapped in faded cloth, half-rotted, barely there, something small. Something shaped like a memory. He didn't recognize it. Not yet. But his hunger stepped back. And something older, something deeper, stepped forward. The bear sat down in the cold, staring at the shallow grave. He didn't eat. Not today. The wind whispered through the trees, but the bear didn't move. He stood at the edge of the disturbed earth, staring down at what remained of the dog. The fur was matted with rain and time. Flies had long left it behind. It hadn't died today. Not even yesterday. But the scent, though faint, still carried grief. And something else. The bear sniffed again. Buried beside the dog, beneath that patch of torn cloth, was something strange. Something not scented like blood or bone. Something human. He leaned in and gently brushed the leaves away with his paw. The soil gave with a soft crumble, revealing faded color, red nylon, dirty and frayed, twisted around a metal ring. A collar. The bear stared. He knew this shape. The way it clinked when moved. He tapped it with a claw chink, and the tag flipped over. There was scratching on it. Not claw marks. Letters. Words. The bear couldn't read. But that sound. That shape. It was buried deep in his memory, not like thought, but like smell. The way some trees reminded him of spring, or the sound of distant water made him ache without knowing why. This color meant something. And so did the dog. The bear stepped back and sat again. Not to rest. To remember. He closed his eyes. There had been a time, not long after his mother vanished, when he wandered crying, half-starved in a clearing. When something warm and fast had circled him. Barked at him. Nudged him toward shelter. Slept beside him in a hollow log for days. That scent. That bark. The dog. Not this one. But maybe, the same one? Or the same kind. The bear looked down again. The dog had died. But something still lived beneath the soil. Something that hadn't been eaten yet. The bear couldn't read, but he could feel. The collar was more than a loop of fabric. It was memory soaked into material. Rain, sweat, bark, and campfire smoke clung to it in faded traces. He pawed at it again. The tag flipped once, then settled against the dirt with a soft metallic chime. Chink. He sniffed the edge of the tag. Something sharp hit the back of his nose, a scent like salt, like sadness, like something buried not just under dirt, but under time. Then another scent, one that made him stop. Human. But not the kind that chases, shouts, or fires bullets. This was softer. Smaller. Like the one who once left food at the edge of the woods. The one who held out a hand and whispered instead of screamed. The bear lowered his head and pressed his nose to the cloth. Suddenly, a flicker. Not sight. Not smell. Something in between. A flash of pine needles under moonlight. A giggle. A tiny voice calling through the woods. Bear. Come on, Bear. The dog running ahead, tail wagging. The human child following, clumsy boots, outstretched arms, fearless. The bear opened his eyes. He'd known them. Not in the way animals know each other in the wild, through territory and threat, but in the way a cub might know a sibling it never got to keep. In the way an orphan knows warmth when it's given freely. He hadn't just seen this dog before. He'd followed it once. Played beside it. Slept curled beside it beneath the shelter of a boulder, while the child hummed lullabies not meant for bears. And now the dog was dead. The child? Nowhere. But the collar remained. A sign. A symbol. And now, a tether. The bear looked around the forest. He didn't need food anymore. He needed to know what else had been buried. Or who. He walked without thinking. The collar dragged from his jaws, clinking softly against his teeth. Its scent led him more than any memory could. He followed it uphill, where the trees thinned and the ground wore the marks of old footpaths, not deer trails but human-made ones. Flattened by boots. Once warm with laughter. The bear paused at a moss-covered stump. He knew this place. It didn't look the same anymore. The log where they used to sit was half-rotted. The fire pit had collapsed into itself, stones scattered and blackened. But the feeling remained, that impossible thing animals don't have words for, but know deep in their bones. This was where they played. He stepped forward, slowly. Once, a younger version of himself had rolled through these leaves, tumbling after the dog as it barked and pounced. The cub had been clumsy, confused, wild. But the dog never feared him. Never growled. It had brought him here. And the child. He remembered the sound of her voice, high and soft, not like the shouting humans. She had a name, but he didn't know it. Only the feeling it carried. Trust. Joy. Safety. She had fed him from her hand once. He'd been smaller than the dog then. Fur still patchy. Legs too long for his own weight. But they had laughed. Even now, the bear could still feel the faint imprint of her palms on his head. He reached the fallen log and sat down beside it. The collar dropped from his jaws. It rested on the soft moss like an offering. Then he saw it. Carved into the bark of the log, barely visible under years of rain and rot, 3 letters. Jagged, uneven. B+M+D. Bear. Mia. Dog. He didn't know how he knew. But he knew. And now one was gone. The other, maybe not. The bear stood, slower this time. He would find her. Not for himself. For the one who could no longer run beside her. The wind howled through the trees as evening fell, sharp with ice. The bear hadn't eaten in 2 days. A squirrel darted across his path. His eyes followed it. Instinct surged, the hunger clawing from inside his belly, loud, impatient. He didn't move. The collar still hung from his mouth. He was no longer just a bear tracking scent. He was something heavier. Something carrying memory. Carrying a promise. He passed through hollows and over logs, paws stiff with cold, body aching from lack of food, and yet he kept going. Then, smoke. A faint line curling into the dusk sky. He slowed. Dropped to all fours and crept forward through the underbrush. A cabin. Wooden, slanted, nearly swallowed by the trees. It was small, just one window lit with orange glow, and a chimney coughing warmth into the freezing air. He paused behind a tree. And there, inside the window, was a shape. Small. Curled in a blanket. A human child. She was older than he remembered. No longer the wild little girl who fed him berries. But it was her. He could feel it. Something in the way her shoulders slumped, the way she held something in her lap. He stepped forward. The child looked up suddenly, eyes wide, face pale. She stood. He froze. She moved to the door. Opened it slowly. The cold hit her instantly. Her breath curled in white clouds. They stared at each other across the clearing. The collar hung from his jaws. Her eyes dropped to it. They welled with tears. She stepped down the porch stairs, slowly, carefully, until she stood a few feet from him. She knelt. Reached out. The bear didn't flinch. He stepped forward and placed the collar in her palm. And in that moment, the hunger waited. Because this was more important than eating. This was remembering. This was returning. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The collar in her hand said enough. She clutched it to her chest like it was still warm, like the dog was still beside her, like time could bend for just a second and bring him back. The bear sat quietly in the snow, steam rising gently from his fur. He watched her without blinking, without moving, as if to say, I stayed. So you wouldn't be alone. And she understood. She stepped forward, hesitant, but not afraid, and laid a trembling hand on his shoulder. He didn't flinch. The first human touch in seasons. For a long while, they stood like that. Two creatures shaped by loss. One who could speak but didn't, and one who never could, yet still told everything. Then, without a word, she turned and walked around the side of the cabin. He followed. Behind the cabin, half covered in snow, was a mound. A stone placed at its head. Crude. Marked only with a paw print she had once carved into clay. She knelt beside it. And so did the bear. They sat there for what felt like a whole winter passing. A silence so still it became part of the trees. Finally, as the first stars pierced the sky, she rose. She walked back inside. The bear remained. The hunger had returned, gnawing now, but he ignored it. He laid down beside the grave. Not over it. Beside it, as he once had beside the dog when they were all still together. The same way they had curled up in that hollow log. The same way the dog had once stayed beside him. The snow thickened. Wind stirred the trees. Still he didn't move. Because this wasn't a place for sleep. It was a place for memory. For guardianship. For stories never told with words. And in the morning, he would rise. Not just to feed, but to check the door. To make sure she was still there. Because now he had two graves to remember. But one life to protect.